Hello, it's Keith here. We're going to be beta testing once again. I'm sure you know the drill now. We're going to have a look at the hardware I've got and then we're going to see some gameplay. So today we're going to be testing the MSX2 with the V9990. That means it's a regular MSX2, it's not a Turbo R or anything. This is the absolute lowest one you can get. Anyway, let's have a look at the hardware and we'll see what we're going to be playing with. Okay, so this is the MSX2 I'm going to be using today. This is kind of the cheapest and most common MSX2 you'll see around. It's got no internal floppy drive, but we can get around that. Now, a machine like this will tend to go for around $50 or something like that at the moment. I mean, they're very widely available, and I mean, even at that price, you would usually expect them to work fine. But even if there are problems, it would probably just be the membrane that needed some repair, which you can do with the metallic paint that I showed on the Amstrad video. Now, the one thing to watch with them is they do use a quite special power supply. The power plug is the exact same shape as the Neo Geo CD one, but the voltages are different. And it's got it uses 12 volts and 5 volts, but I believe the input voltages are 18 and 9 or something like that. And the 9, I think the 18 volts is AC as well. Yeah, that's correct. So don't think you can easily get one that's missing its power adapter and just sort of bodge it together, because you will struggle a little bit there. But anyway, so nice cheap MSX we're going to be using today, and so we're going to upgrade it, so to speak, with the Mega Flash ROM, which is going to emulate a floppy disk for us, and this will allow us to load the game. We're not using the internal memory, and Chibi Akumas does not use the SCC of this, so we're just using it as a disk emulator. And then we're going to use the V9990 here. This is the Paragraph Lite model. And this is going to be our graphics accelerator, and that's going to, even though the process is the same speed, the game will be a lot faster. So that's what we're going to use as well today. Now, the price on all this, as I say, this is around $50. I actually got this one for $10, but it was missing the power supply. This is the sort of high-end model. This is $150, but the basic model is $100, which would just emulate the disc. And this is around $90 at the moment. So altogether, you're looking at about $240. Now, one thing to notice about the V9K here, it has a VGA out, but it's not a normal VGA out. A normal one, I believe, runs at 30 kilohertz, but this one runs at 15. So unless you've got a TV that is compatible with it, you may have trouble. So if you're not familiar with them, when you buy it, I suggest you buy the converter here, which will allow you to just use a composite or what's it called, S-Video, because you don't want to be buying this and then finding you plug it in, you can't make it work, and you don't know whether it's faulty or not. So if you're not sure what you're doing, if you're not sure it's going to work, with your hardware, I'd suggest you buy this, because this is very cheap, or you can make it yourself if you're feeling skilled. Now, the way I'm using it, because my TV has a VGA in, but it doesn't support the frequency that this uses. So what I'm using, I'll just show you. I'm using one of these fantastic arcade boards. Now, this cost about $20. I use a virtually identical device for all of my RGB consoles. You can connect them using these pins here. This one is the newer model, which has the VGA in. My old one doesn't have the VGA in, but apart from that, it's identical. So I could use this to connect all of my RGB systems like the Amstrad CPC just fine. But today I'm going to be, I've just got a standard VGA cable here, plugging in to this input here, and then the output goes straight to the TV, and that solves the problem of the irregular output of the V9990 here, without any worrying about buying a special monitor. So that's my suggestion there. Then just one other thing, because you need to be able to start the game, I'm using this little TV reversing screen here, just so that I can see the MSX startup screens and just check everything's going okay there. So, yep. So we're going to plug the Mega Flash one into slot 1 here. I'm going to plug the V9K into slot 2 at the back here. We're going to plug the VGA from the V9K here, out of frame, but we're going to plug that into the RGB board, and then we're going to plug the output to the RGB board into my TV. 5-volt line into the RGB board, and that's powered up now. And then we're going to plug my little TV into the back of the MSX, plug the speaker in to the MSX as well, so we get music. Okay, and I think that should do us. I'm going to plug my joypad in so we can play the game. We can play it with keys, but I will play with the joypad. Okay, that's everything. So let's have a look now. Let's get the camera onto the screens. Okay, so we're ready to go. Now, I've got the latest revision of the game on the SD card. I've made a slight change since last time. I've removed the autoexec.bas file, so it won't start up automatically. There's two ways of loading the game. You can run the standard disk file, disk.bas, which will load the normal version of the game, or you can load V9990.bas, and that will load the alternate version of the game. Now, you should, I believe, be able to hold down Shift, I think it is, to skip the autoexec.bas, but it wasn't working, so I've actually deleted it from the disk image. So I'll have to start it manually, but that's no problem. So I'm going to load the disk image now. I'll just press the power button here. I've unplugged the power. So. Okay, there's some rubbish from me holding down the keys there. So now I'm going to type RUN quote V9990.BA. Yes. Okay, and now the loading screen there is on the V990 version. It's the same loading screen as the regular version. So as I say, this is a standard 4 MHz MSX2. It's got no processor speed increase over the one you saw last time, so it's purely that the graphics card is able to do more work more quickly this time. So let's start the game. So everything looks the same at the moment. You saw very quickly a loading screen there. Because of the extra memory, I've been able to put some a loading screen in and a better continue screen. So now you can see the game. The first thing you should notice is the bullets are now 6 pixel sprites rather than the original dots. So that's a big increase. And when enemies are killed, you'll see they kind of explode into fireworks. This was a particle effect added that was basically taking advantage of the extra CPU and graphics power available to the system. It was quite a challenge to work out ways to make the game graphically superior without totally rewriting the game and without making the gameplay different. So the particle effect was just a little added touch. Another difference you'll notice, it's relatively minor on this level, but the background has a second layer of mountains there, and at the foreground you've got this foreground parallax peak here in the mountains, which again just gave the whole level more of the feel that I originally imagined it having when I designed it many years ago on the Amstrad CPC. Now, I'm playing terribly here because I'm talking while I'm playing, but even though the bullets are now 6 pixels in size rather than the original 2, the hit zones are unchanged. This is purely cosmetic. It can be harder to see and it does make me play worse, but the gameplay has not changed on this version of the game. It's still the same difficulty. The only potential difference in difficulty would be that the speed is faster. It doesn't slow down as much when the action heats up, but as you can see, I think this version really does give a nice feel to it. And I have to say, as a programmer of this system, when I started sort of writing Chibi Akumas on the Amstrad CPC, I sort of had this crazy vision, so to speak, of one day maybe I could write this on the Neo Geo or something like that, a system that was a 16-bit system with real powerful, colourful graphics and speed. And the V9K on the MSX gives you almost that same ability, but still within the 8-bit version. I mean, the version you're seeing today, the logic code is almost entirely the same as the original game I wrote. So whereas if I had released this on something like the Neo Geo, I'd have had to completely rewrite it. Being able to use this much more powerful graphics card that really has comparable speed to, I'd say, at least the Super Nintendo, but probably vastly exceeds that. I think it's pretty comparable to either the PC Engine or possibly the Neo Geo. It's difficult to tell. I've heard it said it's around 9 times the speed of the internal MSX graphics processor, and I'd say that's definitely true from what I've seen. You're seeing the sort of all 256 bullets on screen are now these sort of spinning bones, and you'll see that the speed is not as smooth as it could be, so to speak. But when we see it on the Turbo R, you'll see that actually it's not the graphics card that's limiting this; it's the CPU. This is still CPU limited, even with all this action going on. The graphics card is waiting for the CPU, and that's one thing with the WSX that system. If you're not familiar with it, has a 5.7 megahertz processor or something. It's about a third faster, and if you've got the V9K with that, you do get a small speed boost, although not enough for the game to run in the more advanced, smoother mode that it does on the Turbo R. We'll have a look at that tomorrow. But as I say, so here's level 2, and this is level 2 is the first level where I really started to go crazy with the graphics. I programmed the game in order, so with level 1 I was, you know, getting my feet with the V9K, getting the code to work, you know, literally that. And so by the second level I really wanted to go to town. Now the second level was a time where in the original game, the first version of Chibi Akumas, not so much the new version, but the first version, I'd always imagined this looking like Wonder Boy or something, this level. But I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do trees or anything on the CPC. So with version 1.666, I was able to do some better graphics, and you know, it did start to have that feel on the CPC. But now with the full power of the V9K, where I could literally load multiple layers of parallax, that's exactly what I did. So now this is really exactly what I had in mind for the level. I mean, at this point, it's not so much that my abilities are limited by the hardware. It's more, yeah, I was having to spend a lot of time drawing these. I'm not an amazing artist or anything, and I do take pride in trying to do all the graphics and all the work on the games myself. So, you know, I was trying to draw the best forest I could, and this is basically the best of my graphical ability, possibly not the best of the V9K's ability. So yeah, I'd say this is really I'm really pleased with what this level looks like. And to be honest, with the exception of the first level, all the levels after this have really had quite a boost with regards to multiple layers of parallax and vastly improved backgrounds. Whereas that first one, yeah, okay, it's nice. It was a nice little background, but it didn't see a massive improvement over the regular version. And of course, the V9K could very easily give a massive improvement if I had put the extra time into it. But I was fairly happy to have the first level as being a bit modest in its visual appeal compared to the later levels, just because it's the first level. Hopefully people are enthralled enough by the game itself, and you know, if the later levels have something new to add to it with a bit of extra parallax, then maybe that'll keep excitement to see them. And the later levels do have a lot of extra features. Now, I'll just die a second. Your dead screen, this is now copied and recolored from the CPC 128K version. That's not quite the version you have on the MSX2, and this loading screen is missing on the MSX2, and that's simply because there's not enough memory to keep them in memory all times. So I had to, it didn't make sense loading them in to show the loading screen, so I didn't do that. So you just get a small text message for the loading screen, and the continue screen is it's a heavily compressed single sprite. But as I say, it's still very nice, but just a few little bonuses for the V9K owners. So here's Zombie Chew with the Z-shaped bullets, and absolute crazy battle here, and the same backgrounds, of course. The loading times are longer on this version, of course, the V9K version, because of course there's so much extra data to load. It's just that. And the game on the MSX2 is vastly larger than the other versions, and that's simply the V9K. I think one of the levels, the V9K background of the last level is 24 kilobytes compressed alone. It's and that's just the background, not the actual sprites or data or anything. So compared to the CPC Plus version, where most of the levels are less than 16K, all the levels are less than 16K, I think. But as I say, it's really has seen a boost on the V9K, the graphic size, and of course the CPC can't do the 16 colours, not on all the levels anyway, just depending on the layout. So anyway, I'm hoping you'll see this and be quite impressed, because I'm really pleased with the way it's come out. And as I said before, I think this is really, if let's say I'll just pause the game there, because I'm not going to show you the next level, because I want you to hopefully play the game yourself to see this. So we'll just switch it off here. So I'm hoping you'll like what you see today, and if you're not particularly, if you haven't got an MSX yet, then maybe you'd consider buying an MSX2 with the V9K, the V9990, because as I say, it's relatively affordable. You'd be looking at around $200 purchase price for that. If you got an A1F or something with an internal working disk drive, and if you didn't, you're about $250 for a basic non-disk model like this, the Mega Flash ROM and the V9K. And I say altogether, that really gives what I think is currently the pinnacle of 8-bit gaming, without going crazy and buying the Turbo R, which I paid about $500 for. A very expensive system, so I'd sort of suggest something like this instead. Now, of course, if you're on the emulators, OpenMSX supports all of this, so you can emulate your Turbo R and you can emulate your V9K, and you can see this anytime you want, without that hardware investment. But if you are going real hardware, this is what I'd suggest you consider looking at. Anyway, thanks for watching today. Thanks for listening to me, and I hope you'll either sort of purchase the box copy of the game or back me on Patreon, because I want to keep creating games like this. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.